Patrick, are you ready, son?
I'm ready to go.
Hello. Welcome to Hard Compound, an American take on Formula One. We just finished watching an exciting race in Montreal, filled with drama and heartache, and all the usual suspects. And Marmots. Patrick, can I get your take on the Canadian Grand Prix?
My take on the Canadian Grand Prix is not close enough. We had quite a few drivers and teams out there this weekend that they were so close to having brilliant weekends. And, something happened. Either it was a reliability issue, it was, using too many engines on the season, so they had to go all the way to the back of the grid, or great qualifying in the wet weather, and the pace of the car isn't there in the dry. We had lots of stories like that where drivers just were on top of it, but something happened where they just weren't close enough to getting the result that they really, really wanted.
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, Max wins again. That's my 3-word take. But this race especially showed both the incredible skill of the top drivers. Max, obviously, Alonso, Hamilton. But it also showed that these cars are just sort of at the bleeding edge of technology, and they are delicate beasts. They'll go 200, they'll stop on a dime, but reliability is still key. 9 races in, reliability takes out Perez, takes out Haas again, really does damage to Leclerc's championship hopes. It slowed Alonso down to where he almost didn't get any points. So I think that's a great take, Patrick. Reliability was just so key in this race.
Yep, for sure. And we saw guys like Leclerc and many others today who were battling with guys in front of them, but just couldn't quite get around them. They couldn't put the move on them, the final touches to move up in the standings. We saw Ocon just sort of hold up Leclerc for a long, long time. And frankly, I think the Ferrari driver could have been on the podium had he been able to get around Ocon within a couple of laps rather than sitting behind him for 20 laps or something like that. So many of these guys just right there, but not close enough to get the job done.
Yeah, Max, I do think he is the best driver on the grid and has been at least the past 2 seasons. He now has a car that might be better than everyone else's. I know it's a long season. Mercedes has improved and shown, peerless reliability. Charles is always there. Ferrari is always there. Perez still has the potential to unseat Max. I know he had another DNF, so now that's 2 DNFs, I believe, for both Sergio and Verstappen. But it looks like it might be Max's championship to lose. I saw some amazing stats. I got into Formula One way, way back with Jackie Stewart soon after his retirement. And he has 27 wins. Max Verstappen at age 24, and with most of his young career behind a Mercedes that was just utterly dominant, he has 26 wins. He's 1 win away from tying Jackie Stewart. That's just amazing to me. And if he gets 7 more wins, unlikely this year, but that is possible, he will pass Alonso on the most wins in F1 at age 24. This is just remarkable what we're watching. in Max Verstappen, even as we're also seeing other drivers just bring their best week in, week out, including the man who came in second, who almost but still did not get his first win, Carlos Sainz.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of shows you how hard it is to get just one win in Formula One. Sergio Perez took a very, very long time
Yes.
to get his first ever F1 win. And we think of him as a really strong driver, and he's very capable and reliable and calm in the car. We think of Carlos Sainz currently as one of the top young drivers in Formula One, driving with a great team in Ferrari this season. And he's not been on poor teams. He was on McLaren for a while and Renault, some pretty strong teams, and he still has yet to get a win in Formula One. To think that Max Verstappen at 24 years old has 26 wins already and shows no signs of slowing down, that's pretty incredible. He's on pace to step up with the likes of Vettel and Schumacher and Hamilton, down the line, of course, much later in his career, if it stays on the same trajectory. But what he's been able to do in the sport in his short time in F1 has been pretty incredible to watch.
It has also incredible to watch, I think, was in Montreal, we got a front row of Max Verstappen and Fernando Alonso. Two generational talents. We're talking about Max in his early 20s. Fernando's in his early 40s. Most drivers would have long since retired. He is still bringing it every race. It was unfortunate to see this race when his car really lost pace. But watching him in the rain outrace everyone, his car just didn't have enough in it to equal Max in the Red Bull. But that was amazing to watch. And it was just so great to see, these two amazing drivers from two different generations there on the front row.
Yeah, so cool to see Fernando back up there on the front row. He's been such an incredible driver for so long, and there are, I think 2012 was the last time he was on the front row of a Grand Prix. I don't know how many of the current drivers in F1 were driving in F1 in 2012. And, to think Alonso has 32 wins, right? And he hasn't even been on the front row since 2012. That just shows you how good he's been for such a long time. I mean, the longevity of his career has been pretty amazing, and he's been just on top of it his whole career, and he just goes for it every race. He's just so fun to watch.
He is, and watching him in the rain, because rain can be such an equalizer, and seeing him get second, that was just so great to see. Even though in the race, I think he had an uncommon slower start. It was a fine start, but it wasn't fantastic. And then his car really just started losing pace, especially in the second half of the race. But it was great to see. Also great to see Haas, the pseudo-American team, in the third row. Mick Schumacher and Magnussen, they really sort of teased us that Haas has finally arrived. And I have to say, I was one of those, I've been sort of evolving to this position of we have to fire Gunther. We're now in year 1.5 of a somewhat soft spending cap meant to help equalize the teams. But Haas has been woeful for years now. I know they have had the least amount of money and they started effectively from scratch, but it's just week in, week out, they're sort of rivaling the McLaren of those middle Alonso years when we weren't even sure it was going to be able to make a lap. And once again, Mick, his car did DNF for Mick, and week in, week out, we just see Haas sort of fail to deliver anything. However, as I was trying to build my case to fire Gunther Williams, I thought, well, how can I first go back in time and fire Gunther Steiner? How can I go back in time and fire Claire Williams? Because Williams has only 3 points. Haas has 16. I mean, Williams is a historic team in F1, and when Claire Williams finally, mercifully for us fans, sold off the team to a giant private equity firm years ago now, we thought they would get better, and they have not. They are only at 3 points, and even equally shocking, I can't say more shocking, Aston, I think, has the same points as Haas, maybe one more. It's sort of a relevant number at this point when you're that far behind the top teams, when you're that poor. The bottom 3 teams are really just sort of almost becoming an embarrassment to F1, I think.
Yeah, something has to change for a couple of those teams. For me, it seems like Aston really just needs to move on from Lance Stroll. I think actually he might have been the only Aston driver to get points in this particular race.
He did. He got 1 point.
But he's been so bad and so unreliable and just crashes too frequently. I think for him really to remain in the team. But I think, of those 3 bottom teams, that's the one that seems most likely to be able to kind of get out and do a little bit better. The other 2, Haas just seems to struggle all the time. They have no money, sure. But like you mentioned, the reliability issues with that car in particular, it is really unfortunate. It's hard that they're struggling with that because that seems like a much more challenging issue to overcome. You have to make fixes to the car that improve the reliability, make sure that it can stay out on track, but you also want it to be able to go faster. And sometimes those 2 things don't always mix. And then for Williams, I don't know, seems like they've needed a complete overhaul for several years now. They just haven't done anything for years, like you said. And it's not that it's just an unreliable car. It's not just that it's a slow car. Everything about Williams seems wrong. And that is unfortunate because it is an historic team in F1. It still has the Williams name. That's pretty special. And for them to be doing so poorly for so long, it is really just sad to see.
It is, and also sad to see because we have not been to Montreal since 2019. There are 2 Canadian drivers in F1, Lance Stroll, Nicholas Latifi. It would have been nice had they at least had their best, brought their best for this race. But, Stroll did manage 1 point. He wasn't anything special in qualifying. Latifi, once again, did nothing in qualifying. No points. I think he's already making excuses about why Albon is already doing much better than him. So that was no fun to watch. Also no fun to watch, and this one also surprises me, is just how middling McLaren remains. Zach Brown is doing everything to build up the McLaren brand, to build McLaren racing as a force, not just in F1, but at IndyCar around the world. They're bringing in more sponsors than maybe anyone else. They're certainly flush with cash, or should be. They have Lando Norris, who I think is now the second best current British driver in Formula One after George Russell. Once again, they did nothing, not in this race, and they are, I mean, we'll call them a middle pack team, but that's being generous.
Yeah, I guess to go back really quickly to the Canadian drivers, it's unfortunate that both of their fathers are billionaires, because they should not be driving in F1. And the only reason that they are is because their fathers are billionaires. Anyways, that's how kind of unfair Formula One can be. And, I'll complain about it every now and then, but it is what it is.
But what about, for example, I mean, some of these, when you look at some of the numbers, they start to get a little inexplicable. So, for example, AlphaTauri. I mean, it's running Red Bull. That's the Red Bull B team, we'll call it. But it's, 304 points for Red Bull, 27 for AlphaTauri. Yuki crashed out in this race. Pierre Gasly, who keeps sort of demanding through his various mouthpieces to be put in a better car and a better team, and he should be the number one driver of a top team, he's doing fine, but I can't say, he's really necessarily deserving of going to a better team. I'm not sure which team that would be, since he's not going to go to Mercedes or Red Bull or Ferrari. I mean, almost certainly he's not. So I'm not sure where else he'll go. Maybe replace Alonso at Alpine. I'm not sure what Gasly's thinking here, but that's another team that's sort of, just 9 races in and is falling much further back than they should.
Yeah, AlphaTauri's kind of weird. That team just hasn't shown any real pace. And Yuki, another crash, not a great weekend overall for him. Gasly didn't really do anything. It has been kind of strange to watch. We were a little bit concerned with Yuki last season or ending last season and thinking, he may get booted this season due to lack of performance. But we were really high on Gasly, and he just hasn't shown much this year, even though he's been asking to go to a better team. The only real replacement I can think of is going to McLaren, replacing Ricciardo there. And I guess to circle around back to McLaren, what is happening with that team is inexplicable to me. They were on top of it last season, challenging Ferrari for that third place in the constructors and looking to kind of make a splash this season with the regulation changes. An improving Ricciardo throughout that season, and kind of the breakout season for Lando Norris. And this year, I think maybe 1 or 2 tracks, McLaren seemed like, they have good speed here. They can kind of challenge Alpine, right? And that's not where McLaren should be. They should be challenging Mercedes and Ferrari and Red Bull, and they're not even challenging Alpine. That's shocking and like not acceptable. That they need to do something.
Yeah, they do. And, I've been tolerant of a lot of the drivers, especially the younger drivers like Gasly, 8 races in. Montreal was our 9th race. I mean, because the new cars, I think, are so different, and not all of them will maximize the strengths of the individual driver. For example, Carlos Sainz has said, with the new regulations, the new weight of the car, how it does in corners, for example, that may not necessarily play to his strengths. Same with Ricardo. But we're now 9 races in, and so I think we need to sort of demand the very best from every driver, and I don't think we're getting it. I think we also necessarily aren't getting the very best on the reliability side. We touched on this earlier. I felt that Mercedes, which has finished every race and is just known for having great reliability and was improving their car every week, would catch up with Ferrari in the constructor standings. Ferrari has just shown over the course of too many years, over too many decades, a pattern of reliability concerns going into, middle and late into the season. But I did not expect Mercedes to have a legit shot at Red Bull. It seemed like Red Bull got all their reliability concerns out of the way at the start. Max had the 2 DNFs. Perez had 1. But we now had another one. Sergio's car died on him in Montreal. And, of course, there were a lot of conspiracy theorists insisting Christian Horner would never allow Sergio Perez to defeat Max Verstappen for the championship. I do not believe that. However, do you think that was a one-off for Red Bull, or are there legitimate reliability concerns?
I also don't believe that Christian Horner would stop Perez from winning the Drivers' Championship. Frankly, Max Verstappen would stop Perez from winning the Drivers' Championship. That's how that would go. And there was no way in this race that Perez would beat Verstappen. That said, I do believe that it was a one-off for Red Bull. Max's car seemed fine. Maybe the knock that Sergio took in qualifying, jarred something. Maybe screwed something up that they didn't notice right away, and it just kind of petered out and showed up in the race on Sunday. There are a number of things that could have happened, and the fact that Verstappen's car was totally fine the entire race, to me, seemed to suggest that it was only affecting that car for one reason or another, but it is not an insidious reliability issue for Red Bull to worry about. They're probably looking at all of that data as we speak, and are making sure that everything's all good. But seems to me like Red Bull probably won't have anything to worry about from the likes of Ferrari or even Mercedes. They're too fast, and even if now and again they have an issue, constantly getting more points per race than Mercedes is going to do them huge favors. And like you mentioned, Ferrari just seems to constantly struggle with reliability, even if they have a really pacey car and Leclerc is flying. It always seems to affect the front runner, at least this season for them, which is unfortunate to see for Ferrari.
Top 5 for this race. Before I get into that, I want to go over the current standings through 8 races. We award 10 points to the first, then 9, 8, 7, and 6. And through the first 8 races, Max has amassed 135 total points. In second, George Russell at 115. Third is Charles Leclerc, right behind him at 113. Then there's a bit of a drop-off. Sergio Perez at 88 and Lando Norris at 59. For Montreal, my top 5 are thus. Charles Leclerc. He started, I believe, in 19th. He weaved his way through. He had good qualifying. They were almost sort of, it was like practice for him because he knew he'd have the grid penalty. But, I thought he did well. And then in the race, he weaved his way through. Had a great race. I have him at number 1. Number 2 is his teammate who almost got a victory, Carlos Sainz. There's a lot of pressure on Carlos because Charles has been outracing him all season. And, he fought Max Verstappen tooth and nail. Number 3, I have Max Verstappen. Once again, dominant in qualifying, dominant in the race. He's making it look easy, even though we know it is not. 4th, I have Alonso. That was just such an amazing qualifying to watch. It was unusual in that we knew it was going to be a bit of a downpour for qualifying and sunny and clear for the race. But it was great in watching him in qualifying and fighting his way all during the race. And 5th, the first time I am awarding him points, I believe, is Zhu. I think he outraced his veteran teammate Bottas, and he had a fine race. So I have him in number 5.
Nice. I think that's a solid top 5, and I like getting Zhou up in there. He did have a really solid performance this weekend. So well done to him. I think he's had a pretty decent season overall. I mean, not a ton of points, but coming into F1 in his first season and being the only rookie on the grid, I think he's looked pretty good in there. For my top 5, my number 1 actually is Carlos Sainz. I think for all the reasons you mentioned him, he's been under pressure, especially in this race, knowing that his teammate was going to start from the back of the grid. He really had to deliver for Ferrari, and he had a solid qualifying. Just a little touch of a mistake in Q3 that put him on the second row rather than being up there on the first row. But solid qualifying, and I thought an excellent race. In a slightly slower car, he pushed Verstappen pretty much the whole race. And that is not an easy thing to do. And he almost was able to grab the win, snatch it away from Verstappen. And I thought it was just a really great race for Sainz. Definitely a confidence boost for him, I think. From this race, you can almost see it coming. His first F1 win. We'll see if he gets it this season, but he looked pretty sharp this weekend.
Yep, he did.
Number 2, I have Lewis Hamilton. He was or has not been happy with the car this entire season. He's been outraced pretty much every weekend by his teammate George Russell. This weekend, he put up a great fight, solid qualifying, really nice race, was fast, calm, just did everything right. It's what we expect of Lewis Hamilton, and got a podium to boot. So really nice from him. Then I have the other Ferrari driver, Charles Leclerc. Was forced to start from the back of the grid, so made sure he outqualified Yuki. That's all he needed to do.
Yep.
And he did. And then, like you mentioned, he just fought his way up through the whole race, all the way into the top 5. So really well done from him. I think had he been able to get around a couple of guys just a touch quicker, he might have been able to get on the podium. So that's why I don't have him up there in one of the top 2 spots. I have him at 3, but great weekend for him, coming back from that engine penalty. Then in 4th, I have Max Verstappen. I think maybe I'm taking him for granted a little bit. He's so good, so dominant, but in a faster car, I think he really got pushed by Sainz this weekend. And he had a much more challenging race to win, which he ultimately did. And so that's why I have him in the top 5. But I think usually we're used to seeing him just run away with it. And this weekend he wasn't able to. So I have him down in 4. Then to round out my top 5, I like that you had Alonso and Zhou in there, but I have to give props to Ocon. He had a really solid race for Alpine again. He's been the best Frenchman this season, I think. And he held up Leclerc for a long, long time. I was very impressed by the way he stood his ground, didn't make any mistakes behind or in front of a faster Ferrari, and just was able to keep that car behind him for so long. I think he might be learning a thing or two from his teammate Fernando Alonso.
Nice. So I have Leclerc, Sainz, Verstappen, Alonso, and Zhou. You have Sainz, Hamilton, Leclerc, Verstappen, and Ocon. Excellent. Now, on the virtual podium, so we saw Max, Carlos, and Lewis, the old veteran, on the podium, but the virtual podium is awarded to a non-driver or entity. Who do you have on the virtual podium, Patrick?
So I am going to start out with someone in motorsport that's easily recognized by most Americans, and that is Danica Patrick. I think she's been doing the Sky F1 sort of pre-race since maybe Miami this season. And, I think she gives an American perspective on racing, on Formula One. She's an ex-racing driver, so she knows kind of the ins and outs of what it takes to be a driver, to race in motorsport, all those kinds of things. And I think she adds a really interesting perspective that most Americans might appreciate and sort of understand. And I think it makes sort of the F1 pre-race more approachable for Americans. And I think she's been doing a good job. So she was on my virtual podium this weekend.
That is excellent. She absolutely deserves to be up there. And it is uncanny because we do not caucus or discuss this beforehand. And for me, the virtual podium is almost Danica Patrick. It is the Sky F1 team, especially the main team of Martin Brundle and Jensen Button and Danica Patrick and the other guy. I now forget his name. I don't believe he was a driver, though. But they do a great job week in, week out, and it's very informative, casual, inviting, so I love it. So Danica Patrick sort of gets 2 virtual podiums, and the rest of the Sky team gets 1, but that's awesome.
Nice. Yep. I guess my other one, just a quick one, the Ferrari Gilles Villeneuve tribute that they had on the grid, I thought was cool to see. Obviously in Canada, Gilles Villeneuve, one of the great Canadian drivers in Formula One. And I thought it was cool to see Ferrari sort of pay tribute to him.
Okay, let's switch to the soft compound. I do not watch golf, but I know people who watch golf. And so I have taken a slight interest in this and have been shocked to discover just the crazy amount of money you make if you win a golf tournament or come in, let's say, the top 10. It's in the literal millions of dollars. I had no idea golf was this popular, but apparently it is played by a lot of people around the world. However, I've also discovered there is a bit of a rip in the golf space-time fabric, and that is something called the LIV Golf Tournament. It's a competing tournament to the PGA. It's sort of, if I understand it correctly, a lot of Saudi oil money is behind it, and they are throwing just almost unimaginable Han Solo level amounts of coin to not just the winners, but anyone who joins this sort of alternate golf tournament or organization. But it got me to thinking, because, we have several Middle East races in F1 already. They obviously want to continue support for the internal combustion engine. Do you think there could be, let's say in the next couple of years or so, an alternate to F1 that's not IndyCar, but it's just some giant, let's say, Middle Eastern concern like the LIV Golf organization that just starts picking off a few top drivers, a few famous veteran drivers, and creates an alternative F1? Would that be feasible? And maybe, to add to the villainy of all of this, we'll throw in some dark Russian Mazepin oil money.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know. Money works in mysterious ways. I don't know. That's a good question. I personally don't believe that would happen. F1 just costs so much to get into, and it would seem unreasonable to me, unfathomable, to sort of start a new F1 and have people back it and get into it. I just think it'd be sort of outrageous, the amount of capital that you would have to front in order for that to happen. I mean, maybe it's out there and maybe somebody wants to do it, but I would be really shocked if something like that would happen. And I think, F1 would likely pull out of some of those races and those contracts that they have in say Saudi Arabia or Dubai or Abu Dhabi, Bahrain. Yeah. A lot of those. And I don't know, it seems like somebody would be hard pressed to start a new F1 and not sort of upset the balance of power that is in the Middle East currently.
Nice. Keeping with this topic of money and perhaps villainy, this was Montreal. This was in Canada. We have two Canadian drivers, Nicholas Latifi, Lance Stroll, both of whom their fathers are billionaires. And, to put it kindly, that's why they're racing in F1. What do you think that must be like? Your father's a billionaire, and you get to race in F1. If, as the rumors are true, that Williams has finally gotten enough money and is going to unshackle themselves from Latifi money and replace him, he's still the son of a billionaire. So, that's not a bad position to be in. We can make fun of Nicholas Latifi or question, Stroll's driving ability, because he does seem to crash quite a lot. But that's still a nice position to be in, don't you think, Patrick?
I do think. I was thinking about this earlier, and I was thinking of how the way Lance Stroll and Nicholas Latifi drive, and it just seems like they drive without a care in the world. And it seems to me like that is entirely because of where they come from. Lewis Hamilton, Esteban Ocon, lots of these guys came up in tougher conditions, had to kind of fight their way into the sport. And I think that is reflected in the way that they drive. And seems like, for whoever the driver is, the way that they drive is kind of, you can kind of see themselves in the way they drive. And I think we can see that in these two Canadian drivers. They just seem like, meh, if I don't win, if I crash, like, who cares? I'm still a billionaire. I don't care.
Across the line, that is our segment where we make the predictions for the next race. The next race will be in Silverstone. That is in England. That is also the race that Mercedes essentially put a stake in the ground, saying their car will be finally competitive with Red Bull and Ferrari. They have hinted at this for weeks. Lewis Hamilton has talked for weeks about experimenting with car setup, about issues with the car, about getting the most out of the car. Toto Wolff has decried a lot of the new regulations, insisted upon having the FIA change some of the rules to help, obviously to help Mercedes. that is clear, but also possibly to help all the drivers because the bouncing, the porpoising has gotten so bad for several of them. But I think Silverstone could be a very interesting race. So I want us to talk about our predictions for the race. Now, in the Cross the Line segment, we keep score. So we predict who we think the top 5 drivers will be. And if we predict correctly, we get a point. If we predict the exact position they finish in, we get 3 points. And if I choose a driver, he's off the table. You can't choose him. If you choose a driver, he's off the table. I can't choose him. That was quite the build-up. Where are we in the across the line standings, Patrick?
Well, after 8 races, I was ahead 33-29. This race, you absolutely dominated across the line, scoring 7 points to my 2. You are now ahead 36-35 in the across the line standings.
Wow. That is a bit of a shocker. All right. Yeah, this was an interesting race, Montreal. We had one Red Bull finish in first. Then we had Ferrari in second. Then we had Mercedes third, fourth, then Ferrari. There was only one Red Bull. So that was an unusual finish for a race. So why don't we give our predictions for Silverstone? I believe I get to go first. Is that correct, or do you go first?
Let me check back here. Looks like it's my turn to go first.
Okay.
Well, let's see. Was it last season? There was a big old coming together in Silverstone. Oh man,
yes, there was. There was
quite controversial.
Max, no one I think is better at getting the elbows out at knocking someone off the track, but doing it in a steward acceptable manner as Lewis Hamilton. However, I believe that was when Max went from boy to man, and that race changed him and changed the destiny of Formula One. But yes, the Max Lewis crash, that was interesting.
It was definitely a turning point, it seemed like, last season, where both drivers believed that they would win the championship.
And deserved it.
And deserved it. And, there was no backing down, no nice play the rest of the season. It was no holds bar the whole rest of the way. So I don't know. That's interesting. I wonder if something like that is going to happen again. My first pick, though, it has to go with the hot hand, the guy that has been winning constantly, Max Verstappen.
Yeah, that's not a surprise. He's got a fast car. He's been just dominating. No reason why that won't continue. We'll see, but I cannot pick Max. So I am going to take Mercedes at their word. Silverstone was the stake in the ground. That was when this 2022 car was finally going to show its dominance. Or at the very least, its equivalence to Red Bull and Ferrari. I am going to go with George Russell at number one. It's not luck, people. He's been out driving Lewis Hamilton this year. But number two, Lewis Hamilton.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Interesting. Yeah, man, if that happens, if we get a Mercedes 1-2, everybody else look out. That is going to be scary for everybody else.
It will make for a fun season, though.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see. No Mercedes on the board. I think so long as there's no issues with Leclerc's power unit this weekend, I think he'll do really well in that Ferrari around Silverstone. I'm going to take Ferrari Charles Leclerc in number 2.
Nice.
Then I think, this is tough. Might have to go with Checo. I think he'll be driving angry, but I think he's going to have a good drive in a very fast Red Bull. So I'll take Perez, P3.
Excellent. I have Russell and Hamilton number 1. So you've got both Red Bull drivers. I have both Mercedes drivers. That leaves a Ferrari driver. I will take Sainz at 3. And then at 4, he's been driving... I'm going to reverse myself here. We're going to have another British driver. At 4, I'm going to go with Lando Norris.
Ooh. Okay. Very interesting. Very interesting. Would be good to get British team McLaren up there. They've had a tough road this season. I think, I'm going to have to go with a guy that's just been so solid all season. Hasn't quite gotten up into the top 5 too consistently, but it's pretty hard in the car that he has. I'm going to take Esteban Ocon in P4. And then for P5, we'll maybe go a little out of the box and go with another guy that had a strong performance this week in Montreal. Rookie driver Zhou Guanyu.
Oh, nice. That would be fun to see. If Zhou got in the top 5, that would be great. Okay, you have Verstappen, Leclerc, Perez, Ocon, and Zhou as your across-the-line picks for Silverstone. I have Russell, Hamilton, Sainz, Norris, and My number 5. Let's see who does well at Silverstone that we have not looked at. I'm going to take Joe's teammate, Valtteri Bottas.
Ooh, nice.
Any crazy predictions for Silverstone or the rest of the season?
That's a good question. I only just, thought of it when I brought it up about the craziness that ensued last season. I think all 20 drivers will finish the race in Silverstone.
Oh, nice. That's all 20 drivers finish the race. I do not have a crazy prediction for Silverstone. It's for this season, and it's media related. Ever since Liberty Media acquired F1, they've been pushing a sort of a new media focus, embracing streaming and embracing social media. They've unleashed all the teams to embrace social media. I watched a documentary recently. I believe it was called Get Back. It was an inside look at the Beatles producing their last album, Get Back. And it really sort of took about 100 or so hours of behind-the-scenes footage, culled that down into about 10 hours, that really sort of helped you understand their creative process. And I found it fascinating. I think F1 is going to do something similar. So we hear that things like Drive to Survive may have run its course. Some of the drivers like Max Verstappen don't want to participate. They think it's sort of, overly dramatized. It's not a real reflection of who they are or what life is like in the paddock. I think we're going to get a raw, extended inside look at F1 and a sort of equivalent documentary look, sort of like what the Get Back documentary was for the Beatles.
Interesting. I'd watch it.
Yeah, we'd watch it, but that's who we are. All right, I want to remind our listeners, send your questions or comments to hardcompoundpod@gmail.com. We may read them on the show. We definitely will read them. I also want to say, for those of you who subscribe to F1 TV, be sure to check out the post-Canadian Grand Prix press conference. Carlos Sainz, Max Verstappen, and Lewis Hamilton on Father's Day each offered up a very touching, heartfelt Father's Day message. And I want to thank you for listening to everybody's most beloved father and son F1 podcast. And we are Lights Out.
See ya. Thanks for listening.
Awesome. Good show, son.
Yeah, it was good.
What'd you think of those marmots? Those rascally marmots?
Marmots are hilarious and adorable, and I can't believe that they are so bold to run on an F1 track.
I know. How'd you like to be a marmot? I mean, just an absolute do not give a fuck attitude. I don't. F1 race, do not give a fuck. A lot of people don't give a fuck. I'm going about my business.
Yeah, said Vettel, drive around me, swerve around me at 200 miles an hour.
Right, exactly. Who does Sebastian Vettel think he is? I'm a GD marmot.
4-time world champion, my ass. I'm a marmot.